What did you do differently that got you invited into marketing strategy and budget discussions?
Great question. I think the biggest thing that I did that, relates to multiple other subcategories underneath it is learning, continuous learning. I think this function is definitely marketing strategy and budget, specifically the budgeting part. It feels at times like it's a financial function, but I think there's a lot of business contextual understanding that comes into it. So learning is number one thing, but what areas of learning? Um, the biggest one that I think that's really important for strategy and budget conversations is to understand um, marketing execution, like biggest drivers and the major
Mhm.
channels with which marketing drives the key KPIs. So understanding execution is a big aspect of being able to participate in budgeting conversations, because we want to ensure that budget is allocated in a way that is a good mix between tried and proven to be successful activities,
Mhm.
but also some experimental stuff. Apart from it, I think just generally understanding the current performance, the what is driving those performance points, what is the strategy forward, what are some of the goals that the leadership has regarding, for instance, different stages of the funnel. Understanding the funnel and learning about the funnel has been a very important thing for me, because we have this marketing mix, right? And tools like Allocadia, Uptempo, when you're tracking it by the execution type and not necessarily the way that your departments are set up, that really gives you an understanding of what is our marketing mix, and how does that marketing mix support the different stages of the funnel. If you think about the different stages of the funnel, like, we are lagging behind in the creation of contacts and upper funnel, sort of like the awareness type stuff. People are not clicking enough. Versus, well, we have a lot of clicks that are coming in, but we're not converting, and the leads
Mhm.
that we're seeing that are falling into our system, they're not quality leads, right? Like we saw that a lot during the pandemic, where everything turned digital, and we invested a lot more
Yeah.
digitally, where we triple, quadruple the clicks and the sort of contacts that we were seeing in the system, in our performance dashboards, but they were not converting. So how do you balance that? And just an understanding of like, what is the right budget allocation based on where the organization could support the business
Mhm.
better. That has been a huge understanding and learning. Definitely networking and having good contacts within those teams that are looking at the performance day to day. That's been a huge that's been a change that I implemented as well, because you
Mhm.
really have to be strategic in that front. Especially in, again, larger companies, I think the different types of marketing teams, they're always stretched really thin, and they have, different requests coming from different parts of the organization. Field teams work really closely with the sales teams, where headquarter corporate side might not really be exposed too well into. So I think just being a person that really, if I'm getting an ask from budget conversation, and if that requires something new to be implemented, really sitting with those different types of teams and saying, hey, this is what we're thinking of implementing. Is this going to be easy for you? What are some of your challenges? I think that that's another learning that I really had to do a lot too, like
Mhm.
learning the actual practitioner's work, because everyone is dealing with their version of the challenges, and there's always some like frustration, or they don't understand how difficult this is for us, but the other side doesn't understand how difficult something else is for them. So just sitting with them and saying, like, okay, I'm listening. Like,
Mhm.
what is your challenge? Like, let's work through it together. That's, I think, winning hearts and friends that way enables you to eventually be heard more in like strategy and budgeting conversations as well.
Yeah, I don't think it was so much about doing things differently as much as it was finding my courage and learning how to speak up. So, I feel very old saying this, but when I first started, we were all still in office. So, all of these meetings were always in person, sitting around a conference table. And if I had an idea, whether it was big or small, required budget, or an insight from the data that I thought should drive us in a different direction, it was intimidating. How do you learn how to speak up as this newbie sitting at a table with some titles that go all the way up to VP? So I watched other people around me and how did they share their ideas? How did they present them? Did they come with it fully baked? Did they have a PowerPoint? How did they change their message depending on who was sitting at the table? What kind of questions got asked and how they answered them back? And then I just tried to learn being comfortable, being comfortable while uncomfortable, and trying to speak up myself and, you know, do those same characteristics of the people around me that I liked and wanted to be like. And what happens when you start to do that is it gets easier each time. And before you know it, you're being invited to the meeting before the meeting to talk about the strategic direction. Or even better, you're sitting at that table and you don't even have to figure out the barrier of entry of how to speak up and find your turn without speaking over somebody because somebody pauses and says, well, I want to know what Carly thinks. And so they just even open up the door for you because you start being seen as that SME with good ideas that people want to hear. And in today's Zoom world, it's even easier. I have been fortunate enough to learn some new skills this last year, but that meant I've been on calls with people with far more expertise and experience than I, and found myself back in that like little intimidated position of how do I speak up? So I keep paper at my desk and I'll write down the idea and then use the raise hand feature. And by writing down the idea, I can still stay in the moment, listen to what people are saying, especially too in case it's going to change what I want to say. But then somebody just politely calls on you, or the conversation natural comes to a lull and you can just unmute and speak up. So that barrier to sharing your ideas is just so much easier now than it ever was before. For me, it wasn't necessarily about, oh, I'm going to mimic your exact style, exactly what you did, but more picking up on the traits or characteristics and going,
Mhm.
how do I see that in myself? Because to your point, you're not going to be successful if you're just up there kind of being like a robot and trying to be something you're not. But seeing, especially too, seeing if people had like fully baked ideas or if they just kind of were like, here's a loose thread and let's all brainstorm it together and what went well and what didn't. It really helped me prepare for, okay, well, how do I pitch this and how much detail do I give off the bat and things like that. So I definitely think that struggle is real. And there were definitely times where I probably wasn't being very authentic and was
Mhm.
trying something that didn't work for me. And the idea didn't work. The idea didn't take because if you don't pitch it in the right way, even if it's a good idea, people aren't going to listen. So over time, it becomes easier to kind of mold yourself into the traits that were already there, but just having the confidence to show them and speak to them. In large groups, I've always gotten more intimidated faster, but one-on-one, I find it a lot easier. So those people I was trying to imitate and copy in meetings, I also would go to one-on-one and say, "Oh my gosh, I had an idea today and I just couldn't speak up. I felt too nervous and too scared," and would ask them for advice and like what it was like when they were younger. Um, Other times I would go to them before the meeting and bounce the idea off of them, like, "Can you be my gut check? Like, I don't know if this is a good one or not,"
Mhm.
and kind of get their feedback in advance. And the benefit of doing that is you had somebody with more experience maybe help tailor it with you. And then too, during the meeting, sometimes that would prompt them to say, "Oh, well, I think Carly has an idea. Do you want to share what we talked about?" And kind of do it that way. So I think that's a great strategy that more people should implement. And even today in the virtual world, I have lots of people at work that we do bi-monthly chat and laughs. And the idea is to just stay in touch with people that have those characteristics that I like and the kind of employee and peer and leader that I want to be and just be around them. So sometimes in those calls, we're just talking about personal life and exchanging stories. Other times we're talking about work. It can just vary, but even though we can't just get up and go get coffee anymore or go get lunch, there are still ways to do it. You just have to be a little bit more intentional about it.
At Indeed, there's a little bit of an advantage, which kind of gets you a little bit of a step ahead. We have a matrix structure, so it's inherently built into a budget marketing operations role. But I think to add to that, though, like how you can make sure that you are staying in the room and that you continue to get invited to discussions requires intentional effort and your strategic positioning. So, like I mentioned, like it's built in our role. Like we touch base with finance and marketing and strategy teams. Like all of that is normal and recurring. So that gives an advantage. But there are opportunities, though, like if you are just ensuring that you're keeping the open dialogue with the decision makers of those teams, but also any interested party. It doesn't even have to be people that are directly who you interface with. And that gives you more opportunity to show how and where you can add value where it matters. And I think that really comes down to being genuinely interested and curious in what they do, why it matters, and then that can help you figure out how you can help them. And that's, of course, just one of the fastest ways that you can build influence. It takes time to build that, especially if you're new, if there's any sort of change in your organization. So you really have to do as much as you can to build credibility early. And I think what credibility means, it's not just being trusted, doing your work and doing it well and accurately. I think it's really bringing that neutral voice to discussions. So like Mops, we are bridging gaps and really bridging to marketing and finance. So how can we speak both languages? We can represent marketing and push with finance at times and create friction. I think that's necessary and help drive those trade-off conversations. And then conversely, we can communicate with marketing in a very digestible way of like what really matters from the financial point of view. Like, why do accruals matter? Why does materiality matter? And that may introduce friction on that end. So it's in a very unique position that I think we can take advantage of, and relationships helps you manage the times where it may get tense, but leads to really productive outcomes. Ensuring, like we've talked about, I think as well, like making sure you really know your business well, you know what the priorities are. And I think an element of just really believing that Mops, like we're not just a function, we're not just creating processes and driving it, we are a force multiplier. We can put pressure where it needs to be to really drive results. We can also be a very strong partner to challenge and change. And we're just so good at connecting the dots that all of that is strategic in nature. And then when you're in a context of a strategic conversation, it gives you an advantage.